Decode Communications and the University of Johannesburg will host a social media summit for Government 2025 come the 1st of July. Now, the two-day event is designed to equip public sector communicators with the latest digital tools as well as strategies. The summit is also a platform for senior public sector and government communicators to discuss and also debate very critical issues and trends in digital communication with experts and academics, and also develop solutions as well as action plans to address them. And launched on World Social Media Day, which is the 30th of June 2023, the summit is hosted this year under the theme Reimagining the Future of Citizen Engagement. And for this discussion, let's welcome Lorato Tshenkeng, who's the CEO of Decode. Lorato, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to SA Today. So in your own words, you've heard my intro there briefly, just describing what the summit will actually entail. But tell us in a more relatable way about the objectives of this particular summit.
Sure. Thank you, Alicia, and good evening to you and the listeners, the viewers. So if we were to walk back to last year when, immediately after the Government of National Unity, was in place, you'd remember, the Minister of Arts and Culture, Sports, Arts and Culture, Govt McKenzie, was at the Olympics, and he had a tete-a-tete with the Deputy Minister Peace Mabe, who's an ANC minister, and it was at that moment, because of that heated exchange, and the issue was, around the Israel-Palestine issue, where there was almost a disagreement on how to communicate and deal with it. And of course, the conversation spilled out on Twitter, and there was a lot of chatter around it, right? Even the minister in the presidency, Kumbuzo Chabeni, had to come out to say there is a need for the Government of National Unity to find a way of managing social media, particularly for political principles. And we have always been passionate about, looking at how government connects with citizens, because you and I, on any given day, or even our relatives, right, they access a lot of government services. But the way government communicates, in some instances, it is not satisfactory, it is not responsive, and it is not they hardly ever close the feedback loop. And fortunately, social media has given them the opportunity to do that. And that is why, this knowledge exchange and sharing of experiences, where we get together and say, what are some of the best practices that we should be leveraging on to make sure that all government communicators can do better.
Absolutely, Lorato. I mean, social media has become such a vital communication or networking tool, particularly in the workplace. But it has its pitfalls, as you've just mentioned. A great example there. We've also just seen, of course, with the Minister of Higher Education, how that also spilled out to social media. But when actually utilized correctly, Lorato, it can really contribute into shaping and progressing the organization. So let's talk about both the good and the bad usage of social media in the workplace, and how also organizations can also use it as a positive tool for work-based outcomes, particularly in your government communication sector.
Sure. If you just lean into the story that you were just playing, or at least you were on now before we started this interview, right? It was on GBV and the role of how young men, in particular who are in boys' schools, can contribute and used for social good. Social media is then likely to ensure that this movement is not only about, face-to-face, because a lot of what happens, and again, if you look at WhatsApp as an example, WhatsApp, while it may not be public-facing, a lot of the things that happen there are around trust, right? Because it's a small community of trust. It may be a WhatsApp group of yourself and your cousins, a work WhatsApp group, but it's always about, a community of trust. And once we are able to, one, look at some of this messaging and start packaging them such that they can be easily shared in these WhatsApp groups, people can have these conversations in WhatsApp groups. So you then know that the conversation is not only about one, like the Mapimpi Foundation and Win and Mkhotyana Foundation having these interactions, but the conversation then continues. So it's not just a one-day thing. So that's the good part of it, right? Of course, then the bad part is you see from time to time people bullying one another. Cyberbullying is such a big thing, right? Or even sometimes where, SABC would have been putting up a news story and people just feel that, you guys are not doing well as an organization because, maybe there's a thing around, it could be bailouts or whatever the case may be. And then they turn that into a negative issue. So that's, just one of call it the negatives. In terms of the outcomes, Alicia, of course, one of the greatest things that has come out of social media has really been the network effect, right? Where a lot of us are connected and interconnected. So even if I am not on TikTok, the likelihood is that I'm going to get a lot of videos that are on TikTok by virtue of people sharing some of that content here. And from a work perspective, some of the or at least the benefit is that you could easily anticipate, some of the issues and or even, be able to say, pick up on things and then nip them in the bud sooner rather than later.
Exactly, Lorato. I mean, especially for government communicators, it's a viable tool to also gauge citizen views on specific programs, just like we've seen, the furore and, the concerns around the national dialogue. We just had an interview around that. And, government there has a serious task in communicating how the process will actually be spaced out. But, I mean, Lorato, the theme itself is a serious call to action, right, for both organizations as well as employees. There is such a wide range of evolving technology in this regard. For example, your AI or your chat GPs, where employees can actually utilize these skills to further enhance their overall work performances. So promoting upskilling and even broadening understanding of these tools where they don't feel that these tools are actually just there to replace their skills or their warm bodies.
One of the topics that we're dealing with on the first day, Alicia, is AI in the public sector, right? And one of the experiences that we've had, because, between these summits, we then run workshops with government communicators and we run social media training sessions, right? And every time you say, by a show of hands, raise your hand if you are in the room and you are using AI. Literally, people want to hide under their desks, right? And you then recognize when you're having the conversation that, one, AI almost comes across as if it's a swear word because people are worried that this thing is going to replace my job. So if you're a copywriter, you now have this thing that is going to. So if I tell my boss that this copy was produced by AI, the next thing they're going to say, no, but maybe we'll take it away from your KPI and just have an AI doing that. So there's that fear. And then the other, Alicia, is, the inability to cross-check and reference. And that thing can easily be done by saying, one, we need a governance framework in place. We need to establish, ethical standards. And that is why the conversation, we want to have it to say, firstly, are there standards on AI when you look at the public sector? And if there aren't, where do we start the conversation to ensure that we're able to put these standards? And that is why we even have the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa as part of the, as an industry body to say, you should also be taking the charge, because as an industry organization of the communications professionals, you should be saying, here are the best practices from, the world over, particularly from markets that look like ours, right? And say, this is how we can then easily adopt it so that people don't feel as fearful and we can easily use it to enable us and to make things work.
Lorato, it's great having you on the show this afternoon, and best of luck with that summit. That is, of course, Lorato Tshenkeng. He's the CEO of Decode, as they seek to facilitate a social media summit for government communicators from June 30th to the 1st of July at the University of Johannesburg.